Brilliant. So welcome to the latest edition of DiBella's Digest with the man himself, of course, Lou DiBella. How's your week been?
I had a birthday over the weekend. It was very nice, and it was nice how many people reached out to wish me a happy birthday. And it's been okay. The weather's been great. It looks like there's some kind of a timetable beginning to emerge, as I guess we expected. And it really is Groundhog's Day again, Danny Flex.
I wanted to save my happy birthday salutations for today for our video, because this is our day, the Wednesday. I know your birthday was a few days ago, but happy birthday. I believe you share it with Sugar Ray Leonard.
Indeed, with Sugar Ray Leonard, yep.
Who's older?
Who's older is a very good question. Ray is... Okay, let's figure this out. Ray is...
Good.
Right.
I'm glad we worked that out. Not many huge stories breaking this week, but something that kind of cropped up, not new news, but something I did want to get your take on because we haven't discussed it before, is Andy Ruiz's move to the Canelo camp for his training camps in the future, and what you make of that move.
Okay. Here's how I'm going to view the move, okay? I didn't like his move away from his last trainer, who I have a lot of respect for. And I actually think that his last trainer did his best with Andy. And Andy's been a problem forever. And the best trainer, his ex-trainer, made him heavyweight champion, along with Andy. But his ex-trainer had a lot to do with that. So I don't want to appear like I'm making any positive judgment about leaving the old trainer. Okay, but once he had made that was done, now he has to find somebody. I think it's probably a good camp for him. I think Canelo's a disciplined guy. I think that the training guys know what they're doing. I think they've worked wonders with the fighters. They're working. I mean, I think that they're, Canelo has a good camp. Canelo has a lot of people around him that know boxing. So I don't think that's a bad place for Andy Ruiz to be.
How much of the blame do you attribute to Ruiz himself? And I'm going to throw it out there and guess probably most of it for his defeat to Joshua in the rematch and how he behaved outside the ring. Not training enough.
I put the overwhelming majority of it on him. But you got to realize something. He's an incredibly talented guy. He might look like a little fat guy, but he's an incredibly talented little fat guy. And he's always been his own worst enemy. He's never been the most dedicated guy. He's a nice guy. I'm a fan. But as a person, he's all right. I mean, he's a fun guy. But he's never been a dedicated athlete. And he's his own worst enemy, and that's what happens.
When you get to the age he is now and having achieved what he has, is it too late now for that penny to drop? Will he ever truly change?
He can. Certainly when your issue is your own training. I mean, George Foreman came back in his 40s as a big man, but an incredibly well-trained, machine. Can he, like, all of a sudden, could he develop maybe a change of scenery, maybe the new people he'll be working with, maybe a combination of things. He still has time. He's not 40 years old. I mean, he has an opportunity to make changes. Will he? I don't know. We'll find out.
And something else I wanted to get your take on. We've seen a number of fighters kind of derided on social media over the last couple of years for not fighting regularly, or certainly not regularly enough to satisfy certain fans and members of the media. I spoke to Abner Mares, I think it was, probably around 6 months ago now, and put that to him as one of those fighters who's had that charge levelled against him. And he said, look, if you can earn the same money for one fight a year as you can for 4, then why wouldn't you do that? And I took that on board, but then what about the other side of things of building a legacy? And is that affected by not being out often enough?
I think the majority of fighters right now see this as a business. They're legacy guys, but they're not the average guy. And by the way, this is a very unforgiving business. I not from the standpoint of the fan, but the standpoint as the business guy. If your promoter or your manager or your advisor or your streaming entity says, I will pay you more money to fight once as opposed to 2 or 3 times, and I don't want you to fight that often, and you think to yourself, wait a minute, I'm not going to fight as often, therefore there are fewer times I'm putting stuff at risk, and I'm going to make more money, so why not? I mean, you know what? You can't fault the fighter for being a decent businessman. Now, that being said, most of the time you're going to make more money fighting frequently. Most of the time. But if you are actually incented to not fight, to fight less often, you got to decide if it's the right business decision.
You've got guys out there, for example, Gervonta Davis, Gary Russell Jr. is another one that springs to mind, who haven't fought particularly regularly. And they're now at that age where it seems like it's time for them to make their move.
Yeah, but you know what? They're going to be more, if they can make the same kind of money, they're going to be more used to the life they're going to be leading now. Because nobody's going to be fighting big name fighter, big money fighter more than twice a year now. Nobody. And it's going, at least for the time being, until 12 to 18 months, call it, or whatever, you're not going to see super active champions. There are too many fighters that need opportunities and showcases and money and television. There's not an endless amount of television money or streaming money. And if anything, that money's contracting, not growing. So, in a weird way, the guys that are used to fighting less frequently might be more comfortable.
That dynamic that the majority of fighters in this era are businessmen more so than legacy guys, is that something that's changed markedly from the past? And if so, why do you think that is?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, there's been a long history in boxing of exploitation. To some places, it still goes on. But things sort of got out of control in boxing, where the popularity of the sport was actually decreasing, that the bankroll of the sport wasn't bigger, and fighters who were not superstars were getting paid a whole lot of money, and it became sort of a business that needed a correction that didn't make a lot of sense in some circumstances. And particularly in the last few years, where boxing's was a lot. It's not like these entities paying loads of money are making loads of money themselves. The last few years, there's been a bubble of real big spending, and it's not like it made a lot of economic sense. So now that all that adjustment sort of kicking in now, and now we have this pandemic, and now there are going to be fewer shows and not as many fights per show, and the bigger costs with less revenue. That doesn't translate to bigger purses, okay? And a scarcity of opportunity doesn't translate to a fighter fighting more often. So now fighters, by definition, are going to have to adjust.
And I hate to end these sessions on a somber note, but something I saw you tweet about earlier and something I thought about a lot over the weekend as well is the tragic loss of Shad Gaspard, the former WWE superstar who died in the process, really, of saving his son's life in a tragic accident.
What's interesting? I met Shad. I met him once. I don't know him. Like, I wish I knew him, because he sounds like an amazing guy, and I have a lot of people I know and care about that were his friends and spoke highly of him beyond belief. Hey, look, I mean, what's a bigger hero than someone that would give up his life for somebody else? And he saved his son's, life. And everything I've heard about the guy was that he was a great guy. I was reading an interview a number of years ago. The reason I know Shad is I know people that have vouched for him and really like him and everything else. But I also had read this interview with him, and he talked about growing up in Brooklyn. And it turns out he and I grew up within a few blocks from one another. So, like, his local little train station and area he hung out in growing up was the same one I did. So I read that article, and in the back of my head, I always knew that guy's from Flatbush, that guy's from Brooklyn. He's a real Brooklyn guy. But it broke my heart to hear the story. And, he left quite a legacy. He saved, his son is, thank God his son's okay. And, his son has a hero to look up to,
Well, let's hope that perhaps a fitting memorial can be created for him, perhaps in Flatbush.
Yeah, I think that, look, he's, people talk about heroes and role models and courage and everything else. And, this guy lived it and died it. So.
Brilliant. Well, always a pleasure talking to you, Lou. I'm going to let
pleasure.
You go and enjoy the
sunshine.
Thank you, buddy.
I'm going to walk the dog. I'll talk to you later.